Let's move on to speak about the vessels of the abdomen. So the first one is the abdominal aorta. This is descending through the posterior abdominal wall, and it gives off three main branches. We're going to speak about those three main branches individually. First off is the celiac trunk. Now, the celiac trunk is this stump that comes right off of the abdominal aorta. It's going to divide into three branches. So that's the common hepatic artery here on the right. That is going to supply the liver. There's the left gastric artery here on the left. That is going to supply the stomach for the most part. And then the third branch is the splenic artery, which is running behind the stomach. So we're only seeing a part of it here. And that is heading towards the spleen to supply the spleen with blood. So common hepatic to the liver, left gastric to the stomach, and splenic around here to the spleen. The second branch of the abdominal aorta is called the superior mesenteric artery, and it branches off a little bit lower than the celiac trunk. And it also has a few individual branches as well. So I'll talk about each of the branches and I'll talk about what they supply in general. So the first branch here off of the superior mesenteric artery is the right colic artery. As we can see, this is going to supply parts of the right colon. The middle colic artery here, which is branching off, is going to supply parts of the middle of the colon, basically the transverse colon here. The jejunal arteries are supplying the jejunum. The ileal arteries are supplying the ileum. And then we also want to point out the vasa recta. Now, the vasa recta are the distalmost branches, really small vessels that basically form this network that supply parts of the intestines, okay? Really tiny arteries. And we're going to speak about the word vasa recta again when we look at the kidneys, and we're going to talk about how it relates to the same type of function, that distalmost capillary of network of capillaries that supplies this structure. Now, the third branch off of the abdominal aorta branches inferior to the superior mesenteric and the celiac. This is called the inferior mesenteric artery. And this only has two important branches that we are interested in. One is the left colic, and that is going to supply the left side of the colon, pretty much the descending colon, as well as the sigmoid artery, and that is going to supply the sigmoid part of the colon, okay? Now, the arteries that I just mentioned are also followed with their corresponding veins. Okay, so you'll see the letter V here, and that's just letting you know that when we speak about inferior mesenteric artery, there is a corresponding inferior mesenteric vein that is draining the exact same regions that I talked about. So the artery supplies the region with blood, and the vein drains that region with blood. All right, let's talk about what happens to the aorta after it branches off those vessels we talked about. So it continues running down. So here's our abdominal aorta. We talked about three branches that came off here, right? The celiac, the superior mesenteric, and the inferior mesenteric. Now we're going to speak about what happens to the rest of the aorta. So when it gets to the level of the umbilicus, it actually divides into two. These are called the common iliac arteries, okay? So we've got common iliac artery on the right, common iliac artery on the left. The common iliac artery is basically this strip of artery here, because this again divides into two. We've got the external iliac artery and the internal iliac artery. The external iliac artery will supply the lower limb. It's going to cross the inguinal region, and it's going to become the femoral artery that we've been speaking about in the lower limb. And then the internal iliac vessels is going to go into the pelvis region and supply the reproductive function, the bladder, etc. Okay, so abdominal aorta, common iliac artery on the left and right, and then external iliac, internal iliac on the left and right. All right, let's speak here about the portal system. So the portal system is connected to portal circulation. We've talked about what a portal circulation is, and we looked at an example of a portal circulation when we looked at the endocrine system last semester. So we talked about a portal circulation being Anytime blood flows from an organ to another vascular organ, organ via a vascular bed without returning to the heart. And so we saw that with the hypothalamus and the pituitary, and we're seeing that here again with the liver and the intestinal structures. So blood that is carrying nutrients from all the food that we eat, that is absorbed in the stomach, absorbed in the intestines, is not taken directly back to the heart, but instead it goes to another organ, to the liver, okay, without incurring a capillary bed. So it goes directly to the liver, and it does so via the portal vein. So we've got the splenic vein coming from the spleen, also bringing some blood supply from the stomach. We've got the inferior mesenteric vein that I mentioned earlier, draining parts of the colon and intestines. We've got the superior mesenteric vein, again, draining parts of the colon and intestines here. And those three join together to form the portal vein. The portal vein brings all of that blood to the liver to detoxify and to store nutrients. And then that blood is sent back to the heart via the hepatic veins. So we've got left and right hepatic veins, and then it goes to the inferior vena cava, and then it goes to the heart, okay? So a portal system is really important for us to detoxify the food, the nutrients from the food that comes into our body. And so it doesn't go right back to the heart, it goes through the liver and then back to the heart. Two important nerves that we're going to look at here in the abdomen. One is called the genitofemoral nerve. So the genitofemoral nerve is branching. It's an important nerve that branches. It's going to do sensory and motor to the genital region, okay? And then the femoral nerve we spoke about is going to cross the inguinal ligament here. This is the inguinal ligament, enter the lower extremity, and that is what supplies the thigh muscles, such as the rectus femoris and the other quadricep muscles with innervation. So this is a nerve that we've spoken about before. And then this is a new one that we're looking at that helps to supply partly sensory, partly motor to basically the groin region. Okay, so genitofemoral and femoral nerve.